joining me in this quick chat and conversation before we conclude, please help me welcome to Atlanta, Candace Matthews. Candace is the co-founder and managing director of Hillman Accelerator and Capital in Cincinnati, Ohio. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Also joining us for this Fireside Chat is our entrepreneur, who has an amazing background, which he'll tell you about when we get started. Please welcome Carl DeVille, who is the CEO of GDX Management. Good deal. So why don't we get started with who you are, how you came into the ecosystem, and what you do specifically. Ladies first.
Thank you so much. So I, started a long time ago as an entrepreneur, just kind of right post-graduation from the University of Cincinnati. I majored in economics and statistics and spent the better part of 15 years providing strategy work in the area of marketing and sales in big co's across the country. So I was going in, kind of tearing apart their marketing and sales divisions, rebuilding, and then bringing in new folks into the organization. So I did that for quite a while. My passion project was a brick and mortar chain of fitness studios for women called the Body Boutique. And then I also had a company called the Fit Mommy. So I've been doing this for a while. This is now my 7th company. But the one directly before this was my first tech company. And it was called Hello Parent. We raised a few $100,000, ran the company for a while and ran out of money. Because it's very difficult to go from that first pre-seed round to then raising anything else. We were entrepreneurs in residence at 8451, which is a data science firm owned by the Kroger Corporation. Mom spent a lot of money on groceries. I had a company called Hello Parent. And so as we ran out of money, I was also running an organization called the Black Founders Network in Cincinnati. And that group of 10 at our first kind of meetup has now gone on to raise almost $40 million. And so every month we've met and shared our network, shared our tips on how to fundraise, tips on how to generate revenue, and we've been doing that for almost 3 years now. And so that group is what inspired our accelerator, Hillman. And the Hillman Accelerator focuses on supporting women and minority-led tech startups with a $100,000 investment, a 16-week accelerator program that runs from June to October.
Well, once again, welcome and thanks for sharing a little bit about your journey. Carl, tell us about your entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, so one, thanks for giving us the opportunity to be here today. Those pitches were incredible and really excited to have been able to be part of this. But for me, both my parents were born in Haiti. They came to America not knowing how to speak English. And at a very young age, they told me and my sister, education, education, education. So I went off to SMU, I triple majored there in public policy, economics, and psychology. Went back and got my MBA, so stayed a little busy in school. But my junior year started a business that was a tutoring business. If you heard of Big Brothers, Big Sisters, they tutored, they looked like what we did. We got college kids to be mentors and tutors in the classroom. I kind of started off with humble beginnings with my dorm room and my car as the office. And then we're able to grow the business to an E500 company. And I think we were the 5th fastest growing educational company in the country at the time. We sold to a private equity firm. I think that year we did about 15 million in sales, and I think over the course of the time that I was there, we did about 40 million. And I sold it to a private equity firm, but apparently the day after I sold the business, I stopped knowing what to do because they stopped listening to anything I had to say. So 2 years later, I had the opportunity to buy the company back for 10% of what I sold it for, which whenever you short your own company, I recommend it. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. But I ended up turning that into a nonprofit, but had an opportunity to get into the business space. I had a little extra cash in my pocket, and I'm good at school, so this investment thing, that's gonna be nothing. So I started investing in small businesses, and apparently I was not good at that. And so invested in a lot of small businesses and failed quite a bit, and a lot of that failure came really as a direct result of identifying great entrepreneurs, but they didn't have a back office that really could take them to the next level. And so actually I was sat down by our COO, who's our president now, and said, hey, look, you really should focus on the businesses, actually providing them a back office, because that's what they're missing. If you give them a back office, why don't you let me focus on running their back office and you focus on developing the entrepreneur. So did that, and that started working out really well. And it worked out so well that I reached out to one of my good friends who was running a publicly traded company at the time. And I said, hey, we'd love to do your back office. He heard what we were doing, and he said, man, that's a great idea. You should take that company public. I kind of looked at him and laughed and said, oh, okay, you think such a great idea, why don't you do it? And so then 2 weeks later, he quit his job, and he said, hey, you don't have to pay me in cash, pay me in stock, and I think we can make this happen. His dad had taken Tuesday Morning public, and so he had a lot of relationships. And so we went down the path of going public, and a year almost to that day of when he said we could do it, we got effective with the SEC and started free trading in this past June. And so our ticker symbol is GXXM. But just been an incredible ride, an incredible journey, seeing a lot of really cool things, and now just looking to go to the next level. Our vision really is to, kind of similar, help minority businesses and women-owned businesses gain capacity by coming in and doing their back office. The language we use internally is this idea of seed, soil, sun, where the businesses are the seed, because the seed has the potential not just to be a tree, but to be a forest. But it needs to be properly placed in the correct soil. And so we're the soil, and a lot of great stuff happens in the soil behind the scenes that nobody sees and nobody notices, but it's necessary for growth. And then after that happens, we give them some sun, which is the money in order to grow. So that's a little bit of my story, and that's what brings me here today. And again, thanks for the opportunity.
So, how old were you when you took this company public?
I was, so I guess 33. Our first trade happened 3 days before my birthday. And so I turned 34, so I'll turn 35 this year. And so it's just been great. And I think you're saying that because Secretary of Commerce said I'm the youngest African-American CEO to ever IPO a company in U.S. history.
So I want to talk a little bit about the back office, and then I want to really walk our entrepreneurs and some of the investors that have come as well, like through a deal, or what have you, like make it really just, let's do a little bit of instructional design, right? This was a course we were building for the entrepreneurs. So when you talk about, and just real quick, I met Carl. Carl came down to South by Southwest through a relationship with this administration and Commerce Department and the Minority Business Development Agency.
Absolutely.
And so I want to give them a shout out for making it possible for us to meet Carl, and then for him to come to Atlanta as well, Julius. So when you say back office, actually tell us what you mean, because we heard a lot of amazing presentations today, and we're seeing the kind of the front-facing or the forward-facing, the CEO, co-founders. We're seeing the products, but what's happening in the back office, and tell us exactly what that means for those who may not.
Yeah, I think you hear the phrase a lot, the business of business, and that's kind of what I'm referring to. But the analogy, I speak in Portuguese, so bear with me. But the analogy I like to use is of any great quarterback, no matter how great he is, if he doesn't have an offensive line, he'll never be able to tell. And what that back office, that management component that we bring to the table, it's really assisting him in that. We currently specialize in payroll, staffing, and consulting, and mainly because we tried to do consulting first, but nobody wanted to pay us. But they had to pay their people. And so as we got into that, we saw there was an opportunity to help them do something that mattered. Because if you don't pay your taxes, no matter how great your idea is, no matter how great your business is, you're going to fail. And so just being able to take care of some of the boring aspects of business, the blocking and tackling that's necessary for them to be successful, that's what I mean when I talk about the back office.
Okay, good deal. So, Candace, when in Hillman Accelerator, and now you're actually
And a fund.
And the fund, and it's not public who your largest investor is yet, so we should.
Nope, not yet.
Okay, gotcha. But you're getting good traction there.
Yeah.
When the companies that you're putting in Hillman Accelerator, is there back office that developed yet, or you're even before they have that? What are you looking at in terms, because you actually came to Atlanta, you're looking for potential companies to select, to
There were
potentially
companies
be.
here.
And there were companies here?
There were companies here.
Well, let me back up some more. You travel around the country looking at companies. What do you think of the Atlanta startup scene from what you've seen today?
It was a fantastic demo day. So what we look for is companies that are disruptive or are in a growth stage. We prefer the growth stage because we want to be able to help them. So we want to help them with access to funding networks because that's a struggle. Access to customers through our big codes within our own network, and then access to talent. And help them that way. So in the idea that you're doing back office, we're kind of just doing venture development.
Yep.
So we are supporting them in those areas. not in the back office, but definitely in that development area. So what was the second part of your question?
So when you're accepting companies into either the accelerator or even in the fund, you answered the first part in looking for the type of companies, but go a little bit deeper. Like when you're doing when you leave here and start doing your diligence with some of these companies, what are you actually looking for to make that decision?
So I think about the end in mind at first. So I look through my orbits, funders, companies, talent. How can I help this particular company? So I'll give you an example from our first cohort. It's a company called Warmaloo. They're a non-electric infant warming blanket that replaces the need for an incubator in resource-scarce settings. Who could sell that? Who needs it? Well, I live in Cincinnati, and our very large big co is Procter & Gamble. Babies need to stay warm. 1 million babies die every year just because they didn't have access to warmth. And so what does Procter sell? Pampers. And they have lots of initiatives all over the country, but then also in developing nations. So I think about that first. Who is the big co that I can connect this company to help them grow and scale quickly? So that was what we did immediately. Then who are the funders who would fund in this space? Definitely you can find lots of grants. Grants, SBIR, there's all sorts of different ways that you can fund a company that are non-dilutive, because that not only helps them, but it helps us. So I'm thinking about those areas, and then I'm finding funders before they come into the accelerator. Because I want to make sure that their round can get filled out. So I'm finding their customers, their funders, and then if they need talent, they come and meet them during the summer. And so that's what we think about at first. We go through, and this year we'll go through about 250 applications, and we'll think about that through every single group.
Is there an industry that when you look at your network, right, because it's really a human construct, when you look at your network of funders, big codes, and then we'll come back to talent, because I'm incredibly interested in how you are finding talent. Like if you snatch a company out of Atlanta, put it in Cincinnati for a period of time, and then send it back to where they are based at, how are you helping them? But I want to dig deeper in talent in a minute. Is there an industry focus that you're finding based upon being located in Cincinnati or based upon the network that you have?
So CPG is super easy for us, right? Because we have Procter & Gamble. FinTech is an easy one, just simply because we have JP Morgan Chase in Columbus, Fifth Third is based in Cincinnati. So those are easy. And other partners, Intel, so AR, VR, health, sports, technology, any big data. Big data, we have 8451, which is the data science firm owned by Kroger. So when I look at industries, right now, the most difficult is that early biotech company, right, that needs more R&D. So we can't really effectively help those companies. Other areas right now that we are lacking mentorship and advisors is in the ed tech space. So if I'm going to be wholly honest, that would be our gap still. But as we build out our mentor network and our investor network, I think that we can fill that gap. But that's kind of an issue with being in the Midwest. You see a lot more investors in the ed tech space in other areas, but not necessarily where we are.
Thank you. So, Carl, jumping in here, you've got some hindsight, having built a company and sold it, and I think it's incredibly important. People build from what they've been exposed to, and if they're exposed to more, they are driven to do more. And a lot of times we have energy that goes into smaller ideas or smaller businesses because that's only what people were exposed to. How did you overexpose yourself through the entrepreneurial process so that you could even build a product or build a service or a company, out of your dorm room, out of your car? From what I understand, it wasn't like you were at the magic co-working space. Right? People think like, I can get into the magic co-working space in town, if I can get into the pre-A or the A in the I. And most of us built companies that infrastructure didn't even exist 10, 15, 20 years ago. And we made it, right? Yeah. So in hindsight, compare your process to kind of the process you see now, and what are the advantages and disadvantages?
Yeah, I think everybody who's successful got a unique opportunity to have an at-bat, right? There was something that uniquely happened in their life that caused greatness. Outlier talks about, the book Outlier talks about the idea of success being a unique opportunity to work hard. And I think that's a really good definition of what it takes to be successful. That said, for me, my parents and the way they raised me really is why I'm sitting here today. My mom and my dad, I remember on Sundays forcing us to go drive in the rich areas of town in Dallas and go see what was possible. And when they did that, it plants a seed. I still vividly remember being very upset having to do this every Sunday. But seeing those visions and those images of what's possible, it sticks with you in ways that you don't really notice at the time. And then kind of fast forwarding to when we went to SMU, my mom was actually a babysitter in Highland Park, which was the rich area right around SMU. And she didn't really have a dream of her kids going there. We both ended up going there. And while I was there, one thing that you learn very quickly is that people are people are people. There's nothing special about them. There's nothing crazy about them. They're just regular people. I have a good friend who, her dad made $35 million a year, and if I really needed a job out of college, I could get it because it was Kimberly. And I had another friend who was from Europe, and his dad traded oil with Iraq and had all this money, and he would go fly to Paris on the weekend just because he could. And so having that exposure to seeing what's possible really changed because, to your point, it expands you. And my business partner on the business to start off, I say business partner, my friend's dad, I knew I needed to start a business. My friend's dad was an accountant, so I reached out to him and said, hey, can you help me? And he said something that was powerful at the time that I didn't really realize. And he talked about this idea of expanding your mind by the numbers you see. He was like, hey, Carl, at a really young age, you're seeing really big numbers. And that's going to change the trajectory of your life more than you realize right now. Because I was interacting with, at the time, at first, I remember the first big check we got from DISD, it was about $50,000. And that check told me this was going to work. And I remember going home to my parents saying, it's going to take me about a year or two, but the fact that this is real means everything's going to change. And he was like, Carl, some people, $50,000 is around here. It doesn't even matter, it's not even a big thing. And for other people, that number is 100,000. Other people, it's 1 million. Other people, it's 1 billion. And he said, there just depends on the companies, the way that your mind is exposed, expanded, or on really change your possibility for the future. And so I really agree with what you said, that idea of exposure. And for me, I think it's really important. There was a kid at Samuel High School that came up to me and said, hey, why learn when I can earn, when we're tutoring, right? And he was talking about drug dealing. And I said, well, I never met a retired drug dealer. At some point, that's going to catch up to you. And it just kind of caught my attention. Why I kind of pivoted into the business space is that there aren't a lot of great examples of African-American male talent in public companies and in businesses in general. And so I just think I have a unique opportunity to work hard, and I want to take that in order to help expand other people's minds and help them see another example of how to get there. That's not LeBron, that's not Kobe, that's just something different.
So, yeah, let's give him.
I can walk, so if you want to play, we can do that too.
So, we talked about exposure, and we'll talk about entrepreneurial, training, but interesting statistic to your point. This came out last week, and it was kind of trending on social media that a young black male that grew up in an affluent black family will be no better off in his life from an income opportunity or wealth creation opportunity than his white colleague that is from a lower middle class family. And that's something we definitely got to have, because we thought we get the education, we work hard, we get a good job, we then go and start a company, and we become wealthy. And now you're telling me that my children, and subsequently my children's children, will not benefit statistically from that. And I think that we can look at the institutional constructs around that and made that possible, but there's something about that personal input that the parents, made you go envision. They made you go see. And then when you get to school, you don't let the four walls, so the students here, the four walls constrain your level of exposure. Then when you leave, you lack exposure because you haven't been outside of those four walls. And the same thing with entrepreneurs. We get tidbits of data and information, not understanding that it's really a lifetime of experience that goes into building something from the ground up. So once you have that exposure, how important is the entrepreneurial education in terms of navigating? Like, you may be a domain expert in your supply chain or your industry, but actually navigating those steps. Do you look for that before you accept someone, or are you accepting them saying, we'll give you that part in helping you grow your business?
So, as I've kind of started to navigate who I am as an investor, I've also listened to other people talk about like this word pedigree. And I struggle with it. Because I went to the University of Cincinnati, and for me, that meant a lot, right? I come from a very humble upbringing. And so I want to learn about that particular, entrepreneur. I want to know who they are, because grit means a lot. What you've been through in life put you where you are today. And that will let you know that lets me know who they are and how they'll be able to get there. If you've been through incredible obstacles in your life, you'll be able to get through an investor telling you no, or a pivot, or something like that. That's not important. But if you've lived a pampered life, you may not know what to do. And suddenly, you just cut and run. I've seen that happen with plenty of people. And so that, to me, is not so important. I want to see it. But if they can surround themselves with other people who are experts, I think that's worth a lot. Of course, they've got to study. You always got to read. You've talked about a book that you've read. And if you're constantly learning and you're constantly growing, of course you can get yourself there. Because, I just started doing this. 3 years ago was my first tech company. I'm raising a $10 million fund. Why? Because I'm studying really hard, and I'm surrounding myself with people who absolutely know what they're doing, and I'm a sponge. And so that's what I'm looking for, is other sponges.
Very good. So we're going from exposure to education, and now let's talk a little bit about the importance of being a part of an ecosystem. And, you're in Cincinnati. One would argue that your ecosystem is incredibly nascent. It may not be that diverse. The planning struggles with that part. How important is being connected transparently into an ecosystem? And you mentioned the Black Tech Founders Group that you founded. Like, you got together and you talked about real stuff. You just weren't socializing. You didn't get together to network and just to party, but you had real conversations. How important is being in an ecosystem and having accountability when building your company?
So I think the ecosystem's important, as long as you are working, right? I think it's okay to have a group to bounce things off of, but you also have to grind. So that group was never a party group. Have we done things together? We've done South by and all those things, that's great. But that group was always there for business purposes first. Now, Cincinnati, our city is about 50% Black, but it's the 9th most segregated city in the country. Incredibly segregated. And so we were up against everything when we decided we wanted to launch this accelerator. We already had 8 accelerators. They didn't want a 9th. We had to get a little loud, and we also had to have a study done. Very much like, we hear Catherine's study from Digital Undivided. And so we had to do an entire study of our state to get our funding from, state and from the city. And so, for us, it's been a little bit of a struggle. So I think it's important to put yourself into the ecosystem, learn from other struggles and their mistakes, and take that in and be coachable. I think you have to engage with other people. You can't build this, you can build it alone in your basement, but then you need to come out of your basement and meet a lot of people. And so, no, I think it's important to intertwine.
I heard something you said that was interesting. So you took the research study and actually turned it into an economic vehicle.
Absolutely.
So it wasn't research just for the purpose of researching. What's incredible about that is our universities, particularly our minority-serving institutions, HBCUs, do some research. And with a slight pivot, that research in each local market, like what if there was a similar study done at every HBCU on the state of the ecosystem and the state of the lack of capital and resources and access to markets and money and talent there, then that could be taken to their respective state or stakeholders to fund, Hillman's, right? Like Hillman was kind of the hill from, right?
That's where that came from.
Yeah. So, but you created that reality by doing the research, pounding pavement and getting a response. So definitely, again, kudos on that.
I think it's important for them to take those numbers back to the alum. and back to other funders. There's a really strong group in Maryland, in New England, and they are really focused on aggregating different Black funders together and using that collective voice to say, this is how we want our dollars spent for philanthropy. Well, there's plenty of people giving to HBCUs. If collectively you can get together and decide how you want your alumni dollars or philanthropic dollars that are going to an HBCU spent, do a study. Say, this is where we need the money. And then have that money funneled that way. Because you get to decide how your money is spent. If you have a group together that is yelling it out.
Very good. And I want to close on capital. So we've gone from early exposure, education, training, ecosystem building, and now capital formation. You did something a little bit different, probably because of your hindsight and your network, than most of the founders that are out here that are, they're grinding it out. But I also think that we're following other people's rules. Like we think we got to do a pre-seed, and then we got to do a seed. And it's like, your aunt and uncle and your family and friends don't have the same money that other folks have, but it's like we feel like we have to follow that respective path, and then only a few get funded, right? And I think we're dealing with, when we see the media, we see like, really? Like, only that many? And I think a part of it is because as a community, we're not becoming innovative in how we go to market, even in fundraising or what have you. But you did something incredibly different, and now you're building your business on blockchain. So talk a little bit about why you decided to go the route of going public versus like raising this traditional seed or venture or debt round. Because being public, that means even retail, non-accredited investors can now go invest in your company.
Yep.
And this is not a public solicitation, by the way. But you're publicly traded,
I am.
right? So
Ticker symbol is GXXN.
right,
Yeah.
right. It's all by the GX.
Yeah. It fits your investing profile.
Exactly. Right. Consult your financial
You
advisor.
can consult your financial advisor.
But why did you take that route? And then why now are you building on blockchain?
Yeah, so very simply, we took that route because I looked at the bigger end game. So when we look at the bigger end game of what's going on, one, the public markets are single greatest wealth creation vehicle in the history of the world, right? And with that being true, that is the holy grail. That is the place at which we are the most disenfranchised, where there's not enough of us playing in that space or even knowing how to get there. And why that becomes material, we talked about kind of some of these big companies. There's something known as the $1 Billion Roundtable. It's a group of 21 companies in America that spend $1 billion on minority-owned companies. Each one of the companies you've probably heard of, from Toyota to AT&T to Johnson & Johnson, the big guys. And they want to spend money in our space with minority businesses and with women-owned companies, but they don't want to just write a $100,000 check, they want to write a $100 million check for companies who can take it and afford it. And that's a great problem, and one of the problems they have is scalability, and kind of our first step was to address that by saying, let's help them scale by giving them a vehicle that helps do the back office and management. And then there was the second piece of, okay, so let's say you have someone who founded this company, is doing great, is 60 years old, now wants to retire, and his kids don't want to take over the business. Well, he has a problem, because if he sells his company, he's going to lose a lot of his major contracts because they came associated with him being a minority-owned company. And if he doesn't sell it, then he still loses, and he's going to have to take a big discount by giving it to maybe some managers or people in the business. And so I kind of asked myself, well, what if there existed a vehicle to exit it? What if we could go in and provide liquidity for his business by taking it public or having a public vehicle acquire it? And we looked at it, we saw that there's no conflict with being minority certified and being publicly traded. And because that's true, I think what we've created is the first real way for these businesses to be able to exit at scale. And hopefully it's the Underground Railroad that gives us access to this world that's never existed. I do believe in our generation something powerful is going to change. The economic and social climate that we're in right now says we're ripe for it. And I know it's going to happen in our generation. And so the question, and the reason why we went down this route was because I said, well, why not us? Why not me? Why not now? And I'm one of the most competitive people you're ever going to meet. It's kind of part of how I'm wired. I think what she said about talent is hard work is so important. You got to be honest about your talent. And are you the number one guy? Are you number 3? Are you number 5? Just know where you fit in the ecosystem, because each one of those are important and provide value. But once that's done, going out and being successful, it's going to be hard, it's going to be lonely, it's going to be scary, and sometimes it's going to be just you. But if you have that right combination, it's possible. And I just felt like, yeah, I think we have a chance to do that. So we went public to be able to take a shot at that. And then in terms of blockchain, it's just with what's going on with blockchain, I think blockchain is going to do to the world what the internet did in terms of it has that capability. And as we look at payroll, I think the payroll industry in particular is going to be disrupted pretty aggressively by what's happening in blockchain. And we just found it was smart to be playing in that space and looking to see what we can do there.
Good deal. Let's give Candace and Carl an amazing hand.